right, tonight we're talking about central angles and arc measures. So first, let's think about, well, what is a central angle? So remember, a central angle, if we have the vertex of a circle, is an angle that's formed where the vertex is the center of the circle, and then the two sides are radii. So we have radius, 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 and then this would be our center point P. Okay, and we'd have a point A, B, and we'd say that that angle is angle APB. Okay, so that's an example of a central angle. All right, now we also talked about arcs. So what's an arc? Well, in this case, an arc could be arc AB, and we'd write it as AB with the arc symbol over it. And I only need to use two letters because this arc, the angle of it is pretty clearly less than 180 degrees, so it's a minor arc. We only need two endpoints, AB. So what we're talking about is arc measures and central angles and how they're related to each other. So here's a couple notes we're going to write down before we do our practice. So let's talk about the degree of an arc. So the degree of an arc formed by two endpoints of a central angle is equal to the degree of that central angle. So let's kind of go through what we just wrote. So the degree of an arc, so an arc formed by two endpoints of a central angle. So this arc right here, AB, let's say we're looking for the degree of that. So we would say the measure of arc AB, so that's how we would write that, it's equal to the degree of that central angle. So it's equal to the measure of this actual angle. And we said that the angle was APB, so it's measure of angle APB. So let's say that we knew that this was 35 degrees. So that would mean that the measure of angle APB was 35 degrees. It would also mean that the measure of the arc AB was 35 degrees. It's important to note that we're talking about the measure of an arc. We're not talking about arc length. Okay, arc length is actually going to be a completely different thing, and remember we use that formula, so x times c divided by 360, where x is the degree of the arc and c is the circumference. We use a formula to find arc length. It's something totally different than arc measure. So we don't have to worry about arc length until we get to class next time. We're just focusing on arc measure and central angles. I want to add one more point to our circle here. Let's call this letter C. And if we know that the measure of APB is 35, I'd like to know what's the measure of angle A. Actually, scratch that, because I can't write it as that. I want to know what's the measure of this arc. Okay, so if we're looking at this angle right here, it's clearly not 35, it's going to be much larger than that. So I can't write it as the angle APB because that's 35. So here's how we would write it. We would write it as the arc measure. So the measure of the arc, ACB, and we could find out what that is. So how could we find what the measure of this arc, ACB, is if this little piece of the pie is 35? Well, what's the sum of all central angles in a circle? So the sum of all central angles is 360. The sum of all central angles in a circle is 360 degrees. So if we know this is 35, well, let's just take the difference of 360 and 35 and see what we get. So we're going to get that the measure of our arc ACB is 325 degrees. So now that we understand central angles and their arc measures and then the sum of all interior central angles of a circle, we can use these to solve some problems. So please go ahead and copy down what we're going to find. All right, we're going to find the measure of the arc JK, so not the arc length, but we're finding the measure of the arc, the degree of it. We're finding the measure of the angle JNM. We're finding the measure of the arc KL, the measure of the arc JKM, and lastly, the measure of the arc MKL. All right, and they've given us that the angle JNK measures 21 degrees. Right? So remember, the measure of the angle JNK is going to be equal to the measure of the arc JK. Okay, JNK, JK, because it's the arc formed by the endpoints of that central angle. And I should draw this as an arc, not a segment. So if this is 21 degrees, that means that the measure of the arc JK, which is right here, is also 21 degrees. 21 degrees. Okay. Next thing they're asking for is the measure of the angle JNM. So this angle right here. Well, JNM, this angle is supplementary to JNK, so we can take 180, subtract 21, and we end up with 159 degrees. So this angle is 159 degrees. If I know that's 159, that's a vertical angle here, so that's also 159. This is a vertical angle with 21. And just to be sure, all four of these angles, these are all of the central angles of the circle, they should add up to 360. So we should check that and see that they do. So now let's look at what else they're asking for. The measure of KL. So KL is a minor arc. And it just so happens that KL is 159 degrees because that's KL arc is formed by the central angle KNL, which is 159 degrees. Then we're looking for JKM. Okay, so JKM. So we have 21 degrees, and I'll write this out. 21 degrees plus 159 degrees plus an additional 21 degrees. Let's see what that sums to. And that should come out to 201 degrees. And then finally, we're looking at MKL. So M all the way to K, all the way to L. So it's basically all of these inscribed angles except for this 21. So you could either add 159 plus 21 plus 159, or you could take their sum, 360, and subtract 21 and get 339 degrees. So we're using what we know about the sum of the inscribed angles of a circle being 360, as well as the fact that we have linear pairs, supplementary angles that add to 180. All right, last example here, so go ahead and copy number 2 in your notes, please. All right, and we've got center point here is X, and I'm going to tell you that WU is a diameter, so WU, and then also SV. I'm going to tell you that SV, these are diameters. Because a lot of times I tell you don't trust the picture. I think in a lot of these examples, they're allowing you to trust it, but, and I spelled diameters totally wrong. So just ignore that part. All right, so let's look at what they've given us. So they're going to tell us that this is 87 degrees, and this is 72 degrees. So they're talking about SW is 72 degrees. Okay. So first thing, before I even look at what I'm trying to find, think about what we know. If SW arc measure is 72 degrees, that means that this angle right here is 72 degrees because SXW is an inscribed angle. We also know that WXU, this is an 180 degrees angle because it's a line. So this has to add to 180. So we can subtract 87 and 72 from 180 to find this missing angle here. So let's go ahead and do that and find that missing angle. So I'm going to do 180 minus 87 minus 72. And this is 21 degrees. All right, so now let's look at what we're trying to find. They want us to find the measure of UXV. So UXV. All right, UXV. So first of all, is UXV a vertical angle with anything? Yeah, UXV is actually a vertical angle with SXW. So that means it's going to be congruent to that. So that's going to be 72 degrees. Next, we're looking for the measure of arc ST. Measure of arc ST. Well, the measure of the inscribed angle there, SXT, is 21. So that means that the measure of the arc is 21 degrees. Then they're asking us for WV. WV, the arc measure. So there's a couple things we could do. When I see WV, I think about this inscribed angle. It's a linear pair with 72. So let's just do 180 minus 72 and see what you get left over. You get 108. So this is 108 degrees. Okay, then they're looking for TW. So TW is the sum of 21 degrees and 72 degrees. So what's that, 93 degrees? And then finally, we're looking for TVW. So I'm going to draw this on the outside. T, then to V, all the way to W. Okay. So this arc measure we know is 87. This much is 72. And this much is 108. So if we add those up, we'll get our final arc measure. So we have 87 plus 72 plus 108, and we get a total of 267 degrees is the arc measure. And as always, make sure that you're just checking the reasonableness of your answers. If we had gotten that our answer was only 67, we'd probably want to go back and check, because by looking at this, it clearly looks like it's more than half of the circle. Okay, complete the following 2 examples for your homework, and make sure you submit the Google form. Have a great night.